Step 1 is an all too rare example of 80s television written by a woman and directed by another woman about a woman's issue. And the duo behind the episode are not just any women. Writer Loraine was charged with writing Dallas's most important episode, Season 4's Whodunit. Unfortunately, the episode feels stuck in the mud, in spite of its premise. Diana Fairgate is skating on the beach with her girlfriends, including a very young Helen Hunt and Wendy Jo Sperber. Nice to see Diana forgiving Brenda after the vicious gossip she spread about Sid earlier in the year.
I actually thought he was nice. I thought he was the nicest father of all my friends.
Talk turns to some doofus named Jimmy, and it turns out that their friend Danielle went out with him and they did it. Diana is horrified because Danielle and Jimmy are not in love, but Danielle says you gotta get it out of the way once you turn 17. Brenda nods along and is about as convincing that she lost her virginity as Steve Carell's character in 40-Year-Old Virgin. At the cul-de-sac, Karen, Val, and Abby are doing some butt and thigh related calisthenics, but Abby is content to let genetics and her metabolism keep her fit. Ginger comes in to help out with the signage for the ERA benefit talent show. Richard breaks up the fun and mopes about being a house husband. Back to the teen group, a very not virgin Brenda asks if a guy can tell just by looking that she's had sex. That's a very non-virgin-y question to ask, Brenda. Well done. Diana's boyfriend Bobby is late, so they start picking on her for being goody two-shoes and not getting her beach pass card punched like the rest of them. The guys finally do show up, but Bobby, who is not at all in his late 20s, tells her that they have to practice for the talent show. But he does invite her to the basketball game tomorrow night. Diana tells him, in front of everyone, that they should just skip the game and go right to his place, since his parents are away for the weekend. Suddenly, the rest of the girls aren't so sure Diana is making a good choice. Laura comes home late from her job only to find Richard and Abby finishing up dinner with the kids. Richard gets passive-aggressive, telling her that the cassoulet he made is probably all dried out now. Like her heart! And Abby tells him that it was the best cassoulet she's ever had sex with. Ate. Sorry, it's just the way that she says stuff.
As a matter of fact, it was the best cassoulet I've ever tasted.
At the Fairgates, Karen and Diana talk about boys. In Karen's day, there were bad girls who had sex and good girls who waited for their unhappy marriage before they had sex. Karen tells her that she's lucky these things are more liberal now, but Michael breaks some dishes and she can't finish giving the advice. The same thing happens later as Diana tries to get the gumption to ask Karen, but Michael throws a fit about losing a chess game and storms off. You know, you'd think Michael's behavior in this episode would be enough to scare Diana off having sex.
I want you to meet my colleague, Dr. Hamilton.
And I'd like you to get the fuck out of here.
Richard Avery comes over to Abby's to replenish the bay leaf she loaned him, but she asks for help with her sink gurgle. That's a little gross for a play on words, but then so is Abby's behavior. The girls drop Diana off for her date, and it's like prisoners watching an inmate do the final walk to the electric chair. As if Michael wasn't enough of a splash of a cold water on her private parts, Diana has to sit and watch her boyfriend play a drum solo. Yeah, not happening. Things also get awkward because Bobby doesn't seem to know what he wants to do. Diana asks him to turn off all the lights and then he's dropping her off early at home. Diana is snappish with Karen and storms upstairs to go to bed. Eric notices something is wrong, but she shoos him away too. At the Ewings, Gary is worried because Earl, the guy from Remember the Good Times, didn't show up to the AA meeting. Val reminds him he promised to help with the talent show, and Gary goes all Bobby Ewing on her, telling her that his job is much more important than her little talent show.
Valene, what's more important, me making a living or your talent show?
Man, the fraternal resemblance is uncanny.
Did it ever occur to you that I might need a little support from you now and then?
Ginger calls Kenny to remind him he's bringing the equipment to the talent show, and to remind the audience that she filed for divorce from him in the previous episode. He's still with Sylvie, who is getting more annoying by the scene. Richard stops by Abby's to offer more help for her gurgle, but Olivia and Val are also there, so Abby just asks for help with her box, which is very heavy and needs to be moved to the garage. What? Diana blows up at Karen as they practice for the talent show. Karen tells her it's for the ERA and Diana should care more about it, but Diana storms off. At the beach, Diana's friends try to drag it out of her, but she's not talking about it with anyone, including Bobby, who is worried that anything she says might ruin his reputation. Instead, she wanders around and sits on the beach staring at the ocean. That's when one of a seemingly endless supply of Massachusetts cockeye comes up to talk to her. She's not having it, but they make some nice small talk and he gives her a beer. After she's sufficiently sloshed, he tries to get her in his van, but she runs away, making this the second most disastrous Dukakis vehicle experience in the 1980s. Diana drives home drunk and gets an earful from Sid and Karen. She still refuses to tell them what's going on, and at this point, it's obvious they're just stalling for time, because Diana has had the same conversation 4 times now. Even Abby's kids are starting to notice that Richard is always around. She tells him to buzz off and climbs in the hot tub with Rich. She tells Richard that Laura's focus on her career is making her too hard and not able to fulfill his needs. Smooth. Richard takes the bait and they make out into a dissolve, which means they're probably going to need to sterilize that hot tub. Kenny misses the rehearsal but shows up at the talent show. Sylvie somehow decides now is the best time to interrupt and ask him to come back to the studio to work on their musical arrangement. At the show, Diana and Bobby agree to set aside some time to talk to one another, and they apologize for whatever happened. Karen also demands to know what's up and then has a conservative knee-jerk reaction. Diana admits that she wasn't able to go through with it because both she and Bobby were too nervous and awkward. Karen tells her that it'll happen for her when she's ready, but not to force it because other people pressure her. Aw, that's a good message. And then they put on clown makeup and sing "Put on a Happy Face" in support of the Equal Rights Amendment. And this is why it didn't pass. On that note, we're out. This episode fell into an all too common trap for the Dallas television universe, and that's taking a solid premise and then trying to stretch it out to fit 44 minutes instead of just coming up with a better B-story. This results in a character having the same basic interaction with different people 4 or 5 times in an episode. This is fine, but still irritating, when it happens in episode after episode, because in the days before VCRs and massive syndication deals, you needed to remind people what happened or what they missed. But inside of a single episode, it becomes obvious when you had a great idea for an episode but not enough material to see it through. I did find it refreshing that teenage sex was simultaneously treated like something that is important, but not something that was verboten. Lucy Ewing would have been smoking a cigarette by the first act break. In the end, though, it wound up being the same after-school special "You're just not ready" message that cemented in the era of the moral majority. It is incredibly difficult to find an example of an 80s character losing their virginity and being happy and fulfilled afterwards. Plus, it probably would have carried more emotional weight if they had introduced Diana's boyfriend earlier in the season. The last we saw of her love life, she was hinting that she wanted to go all the way with her boyfriend who turned out to be a thief. Now she just has some elderly gentleman we've never seen. Anyway, I'm glad that they did eventually get to the big talk at the end. And it was nice that they planted some initial seeds of Michael's ADD issues, which had to be one of the first major portrayals of hyperactivity as something that needed treatment. Although that too seems to go from 0 to 60 in this episode. Although it only gets a little bit of running time in the episode, it's important to note that Abby's seduction of Richard was successful here. It's not exactly a surprise that Richard would cheat on Laura. Richard was openly hitting on everyone from Val to Annie Fairgate in the first episode, and he's thrown himself at everyone in an attempt to be the cul-de-sac stud. Plus, Laura's midday trysts haven't really come back into the picture since she got that job. Abby has a lot more on her mind, but this was some low-hanging fruit, stepping on a mushroom and a turtle before facing off with Bowser. We'll see that play out more thoroughly next episode.
'Cause I've been living life right like I